All right, today, or at this time, we're going to place the transmission on the transmission skid plate. Again, we're using SCX10 transmission skid plate and an SCX10 transmission, all metal. And before I said that the gears were made out of plastic, I do believe they're made out of metal. So first thing we're going to do is mount the motor on the transmission, and then we will mount the transmission onto the skid plate. Alright, again we're using the Axial SCX10, or the 540 size, I guess I should say. 27 turn motor. Transmission came with a pinion gear, so we will dig out the pinion. And all the mounting screws. Okay, we get the pinion mounted onto the motor. See if we can, that needs to go on that shaft just a little bit further. As you can see, it's not quite lining up. Okay, when we put in the screws metal to metal, we should always use a little Loctite. In this case, we're going to use blue Loctite. This happens to come with my Axial SCX10-2. I also have some that I bought other, but we're going to use this to a little bit of this on the screws to keep them from coming out. Now, a lot of times people say more the better on these. You don't need a whole lot, just a very little bit on the threads, just to keep these from coming out when you are out in the field. You don't want your motor to fall out. You don't want your parts to fall off. Get these little screw holes lined up, and I do believe that screw is too long. I don't think we want to use that one. So we'll set that aside and get these screws right here a little bit better length. Again, put a little Loctite on the end of the screw. And line up the little holes. Now, as far as the gear mesh, as you can hear, that's kind of noisy. So that seems to be just a little too tight. So we'll move it just a little bit out. Still seem to have a little bit of noise. So we'll move it out just a little bit more. That feels pretty good. We may have to adjust it, but right now, the mesh seems to be pretty good. You want about the thickness of a piece of paper in between the gears. There we go. Now we got it. Not too noisy. Again, we need to move that gear just a little bit, and then we need to put set screw in the pinions gear. Again, a little bit of Loctite on the pinion screw, or whatever you want to call it. Set screw, tighten that down, and I think we got it. As you can see, it's not too noisy. A little bit of slop, not too bad. And there we go. The engine is now in the transmission. Next, we'll put the transmission and engine into the transmission skid plate. Again, we got metal on metal, so a little bit of Loctite on each screw. We'll keep it in when we're out on the trail. Seem to be having a little bit of trouble with this screw here. I do believe that one of these shafts of that screw is giving me a problem. Or the screw hole in the transmission is giving me a problem. I do believe it's the screw hole in the transmission. I think that screw hole needs a smaller screw, a shorter screw. It may be true for both of these on this side. No, that screw's going in just fine. So we got one problem child there that's going to need a smaller screw, I guess. I don't know if there's threads inside of the transmission or if it's just the hole itself is not as deep as the others. But we'll find a smaller screw for that deal. By smaller, I mean shorter. I'm not talking about length or width. So we will try a shorter screw. That'll do the trick. Alright, we now have the transmission, motor, and skid plate, or transmission plate, all put together. Alright, one of the other things I want to do before we actually put this into the chassis, or decide if we're going to put on the links first, is to take out these screws right here that are again metal on metal and put a little Loctite on the end of those. If y'all don't know how this Loctite works, it actually sets up under pressure. So when you put this inside here and tighten it down, it actually sets up and holds the screw in. Pretty ingenious and little deal. Alrighty then. I'm going to do the same thing with these little screws here on the cover. Not that this would be a big deal if it came off. But again, anytime you have metal on metal, it's probably a good idea to use a little Loctite. And this does not set up to the point where you can't get them out. Now there's red Loctite out there. If you want it to set and have really a difficult time getting it out, you can use the red Loctite. I don't recommend it, but it will hold the screw in forever. And this is one way to make sure that all of your screws are tightened from the factory. You never know when the person put it together if they may have been a little lazy that day and not tightened up all the screws. So it's always good to check all the screws on your parts before you get out in the field. Now the slipper clutch, right now I have it tightened down pretty tight. We'll see what happens if it needs to be loosened or tightened at all once we get out in the field. So there's the finished product for the transmission, engine, skid plate. And that is, I think, where we'll stop today. Next time we get together, we should be putting the 4-link suspension on here and taking a look at the axles. See how we're going to do that. Alright, YouTube, if you want to see more of this videos, of this build, I would like you to press that subscribe button, put that little notification bell, and you'll get the next video in this series when we are ready to complete or continue to complete the Black Widow rock bouncer.